Well, with one hockey season completed, another one has just started, and that, of course, is Chelsea season, with NHL 21 now available on the Xbox One and PS4, and is now available for ports compatibility on the brand new Xbox Series X and PS5. Who better to have to talk about NHL 21 and other hockey stuff than one of the most popular figures in the Chell community today? He's an avid jersey collector, easy for me to say, an EA game changer, has over 18,000 subscribers on YouTube, most famous for his roster editing spectaculars, franchise modes, and Draft to Glory series. Over 11,000 followers on Twitch. He's part of the Twitch Partner Program. But most importantly, he is the only reason I will ever wear a Bruins jersey. Joining me from his home in Maine, I'm pleased to welcome Cody Tougie, or better known as the one and only Tougie24. Toug, it's such an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. We've been building this up for a couple months, actually, and now finally here we are doing this interview. Of course, we'll be up on YouTube, and will be part of our next episode of the Deep Geeks podcast. First of all, how have you been doing during this pandemic? Because obviously here in Canada, it's been tough, but the United States, I mean, my God, it's been really tough, I can imagine, for you guys. So first of all, how have you been during this whole pandemic?
Now, I will say, it's a shame that I'm the only reason you'll ever wear the black and gold, because it looks good on you. But
thank
hey,
you.
to each their own. But I've been pretty good. It's been a very interesting year. Just before this entire really thing happened, throughout the first 2 months of 2020, got into a new relationship with a teacher. So it's been that much more interesting for me, as you have a constantly evolving situation going on. I personally have been okay. There's been some close calls, whether it be with my girlfriend or with friends and family, but kind of just doing what everyone else is doing in terms of just rolling with the punches, doing the best I can. But I can thankfully say, despite some of those close calls, I'm doing pretty well given the circumstances.
No, that's great to hear. And I mean, this whole COVID thing has been tough on everyone. It's impacted, hockey. It's impacted a lot of our jobs, myself included. And obviously with you, I can imagine it's impacted your job as well. Obviously earlier today, I'm sure you heard about the passing of Fred Sasakamoose, who of course was the first Indigenous NHL player. I just wanted to get your touch on that really quickly, because he did pass away due to COVID. We have had a lot of popular hockey figures pass away, of course. Dale Hawerchuk probably being the biggest one so far. Obviously not COVID related, but it's this whole COVID thing has not only taken an impact just on hockey, but just our daily lives. And, we've seen so many amazing people pass away. What's your whole opinion on how this has impacted not just our jobs and livelihood, but the game of hockey itself?
Loaded question there right out of the gates, huh? I mean, it's been so tough just to judge, because obviously we've had the ability to look at the short-term impact that it's had. Obviously, just like, okay, the hockey season was postponed, eventually played, the rest of it through the bubble with the, NHL, playing round and then all of that. And then you look at the grassroots level, whether it be just normal pickup hockey at local rinks or beer league or whatever. You look at the effect that it's had on junior leagues as well, where obviously the big debate in like the OHL is, oh yeah, we'll bring it back, but we can't hit.
Yeah,
which
not great.
You just look at the short-term effects and how we're trying to navigate through this. And then you consider the long-term effects, and it's a little bit tough to not get a little bit sad, a little bit fearful for what it could mean.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it. I mean, it's been a very tough year for a lot of people. And unfortunately, I wish we could say, however many months now, 8 months, almost 9 months into this, on again, off again lockdown situation, really, which, I mean, you mentioned this as well. The ever-evolving situation of it, obviously, being an American, but being, in the state of Maine. I mean, I'm a 3-hour away drive from my home across the Quebec border. It's not that difficult. And then obviously all the friends I have in the community, been able to keep a close eye on not just what's happening in the States, but what's happening in Canada. And it's a fun situation, isn't it? Is the best way to phrase it. And I think that's really the most frustrating part, right? Is, you talk about the short-term effects and what we've seen already and what we're going to continue to see and the struggles we're going to continue to see as, cases continue to rise heading into the winter here, not just in the U.S., but in Canada as well. I mean, just before we started this, saw from a friend on Twitter in BC talking about the rise in cases right now and just what that might lead to. So obviously, that is an entirely different discussion, which I will let you lead into if you want to. I'm an open book
Yeah.
on this, but in terms of the effects of COVID and how it affects people and who's doing their part to try and slow things down and who's not, that's a loaded topic of conversation.
And I mean, you've been very vocal on Twitch about the whole COVID pandemic. Of course, you had your scare with your girlfriend, of course, you referred to as GF24.
Yes.
And Thanksgiving is this weekend, Tougie. Like, in Christmas is a month away. Like, this could get worse before it gets better. And I think it's safe to say the second wave is here. And again, you and I have been very vocal, not just on social media, but on our platforms about this whole thing. As long as we can work together, we can always get through this. We've gotten through a lot of tough situations, but we've never seen something like this ever. So, I mean, if you were to send a message to anyone going into the Thanksgiving weekend, what would that even be?
Again, another very loaded question. I mean, for me at least, I wish it was as simple as, oh, okay, where am I going to be for Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Am I going to be with my family? Am I going to be with the girlfriend's family? A combination of both. But obviously, in this situation, it's like, okay, what's the responsible thing to do? So we had to make a decision about where we were going to be, who we were going to be with, trying to limit that, limit it to as few people as possible. I mean, I do come from a family that often, tries to have Thanksgiving be a bigger deal on certain years. And obviously that just wasn't going to happen this year. But I will say, I mean, you mentioned being outspoken. I'm pretty sure I have 3 fans left that might also root for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I managed to stoke the flames and aggravate an entire fan base because of my comments on their public celebration.
But I mean, you made a lot of fair points. So, like, I have to give credit to you. You made a lot of good points.
I mean, the problem is, though, right, when it comes down to the key point of, hey, just wear a mask and celebrate a championship later.
It's not hard.
And that was viewed as a controversial stance by some people, but when I mean you're wearing the jersey today, but when you make a video talking about a team that beat your team in the playoffs, it obviously some people are just going to view it as salt.
Yeah,
but
of course.
it's not really that simple, and I think that kind of sums up 2020. It's not that simple of a situation.
Yeah. And I mean, where I live here in Sudbury, it hasn't been as bad as like Toronto and Peel. I'm sure you've heard of the horror stories coming out of like Toronto and Ottawa. Sudbury has been good, but there's still been a lot of scares, and we have come close to shutting down on a multitude of times. I'm not sure what the situation is where you live in Maine. I'm sure your cases aren't as severe as, say, Florida, California, but I'm sure that everyone is taking the precautionary steps to make sure that we can slow this down, because like you said, it's getting worse, and the only way we control it, wear a mask, respect your social distancing, because a lot of people are not doing that, and that really ticks me off. It's just the simple stuff that can make this all disappear really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there have been instances here too, school systems that have been shut down and forced to go remote, including my girlfriend's as well. So that's been a big part of the constantly evolving situation. And it does really go to speak on just as an individual, just doing your part. It makes such a gigantic difference, whether it just be the social distancing, wearing a mask. I mean, obviously, I'm not exactly a confrontational person, but yeah, it can be a little bit tough to hold your tongue when you're walking into a store and you just see a bunch of people with masks off, and it's like, there was a break, there was an outbreak less than 10 miles away from here less than a month ago, but no masks. We don't need that. So it is frustrating, but really it kind of goes for a lot of different things. You can only control yourself, and it's up to you to make that decision how you want to go about things. So obviously you asked like, oh, what's the message that you would give? And really the only message I can give just as an individual is just do your parts. It's really not that difficult.
Well said. I totally agree with that. Now let's move on into the reason why we're here. Let's get into the hockey stuff. Now, of course, you are one of the top NHL YouTubers and streamers out there today. And like I said, over 10,000, well over 10,000 subscribers and followers respectively on your platforms. What made you become an NHL YouTuber and a streamer on Twitch? Like, what got you started?
So I was watching some of the people that have been around in this community for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Back NHL 11, NHL 12. I was someone that watched 2BC Productions. I was someone that watched X Tech a little bit later on, and I was in between jobs at the time. And it hit the point where I thought, you know what? Let me try this. Just let me try this. Yeah. There's really no harm in giving it a shot. Let's see what we can do. And I think that initial setup, that was a janky setup. I remember the first couple months worth before I'm like, okay, maybe I'll invest in a microphone to see how this goes. It was recording through the Xbox app on Windows using my Xbox headset. So if you go back and watch those early videos, audio quality is not that great. But really, it was just, I want to give this a shot and see what happens. I dedicate enough of my spare time to begin, playing NHL. Obviously, a lot of people have asked, like, oh, how long have you been doing, the whole roster editing thing and playing franchise mode? And that has been a constant since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I can't explain that obsession over wanting the game to be as accurate and reflect the current state of the real life game. I've just always had an obsession with having that be as close to the real thing as possible. Yeah. And for anybody who, I guess, is kind of wired like I am, you might remember on the Xbox 360 days, there was a community known as Peter Puck, and they'd have the option. They would customize the rosters. Back then, you could actually download those rosters like onto a USB stick, get it onto your Xbox. It was a little bit complicated, but not too bad. So really, that passion was always there. And it came down to, I think this was 2015. I think I've been doing this for 5 years already, which is absolutely insane. But it really just came down to, I'm going to give this a shot. And then, that was the YouTube side of things. And then 2 years or so into that, I finally decided to give the Twitch live streaming an opportunity or a shot. And thankfully, I waited. Building up on YouTube or Twitch, regardless, is incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. But I'm thankful that I at least had that YouTube audience first, because I think it might be even more difficult to break into streaming. If you're uploading videos and you're getting 5, 10, really under 100 views per video, it can be demoralizing. But I don't know if it's as demoralizing as streaming for nobody or one person or two person or two people. And I never had to really experience that. So the Twitch side of things was easier, than starting up on YouTube. The demand was there already. I essentially had a head start on that side of things. And it just seemed like the next evolution from the YouTube side, where, what's better than making videos and reading the comment section, having that direct live interaction with my audience.
Yeah. And I mean, you have definitely come a long way. I'll say that because I'll be honest, I haven't been there since the beginning, but I have been there for the last 2-3 years, checking in periodically. And I mean, your Draft to Glory series is what got me hooked on your channel, because I mean, I've tried to stream in the past. I would get, like you said, 1 or 2 viewers a day, and it was very demoralizing. So I kind of gave up on it, but it kind of helped me practice my craft for commentary, and that's kind of what got me to go to college for this. So I guess you could say that you're kind of an influencer on that, so thank you for that.
I'll take it. I mean, a big part of it, now that you mention it, a big part of it was having a passion for commentary as well, and not exactly knowing what the next step was, if there was one, to try and get those reps in sitting in front of a microphone. And this was the best way I could think of to try and get those reps in. And we could talk about it a little bit later on if you want to, or right now, but obviously it's led to some great opportunities as well. Nothing, I would say, that compares to you, as much as you're talking about me being the influencer. I mean, color commentator or just outright commentary for the Sudbury Wolves is something I am very much envious of. So
and I mean, for me, it's been a dream, but like, everyone gets their start somewhere. I started with with a local junior A team that's just a few minutes outside of Sudbury. So that's where I got my start. So I mean, NOJHL is always close to my heart, but like doing the Wolves has been a dream of mine. And you mentioned the commentator part. You're actually an esports commentator, which is something I kind of always wanted to do too. And esports never really got that much attention years ago, but now it is one of the biggest booming markets on Twitch nowadays. What got you started with the esports commentary?
So I remember having conversations. This was about 2 years ago. I knew when it came to the community, the competitive sixes community primarily, that I wanted to get involved. You talk about those next steps. Like, okay, I want to start in on getting the reps in on the mic. I'm going to start a YouTube channel. What's the next step? Let's start in on Twitch. What's the next step after that? Try to get into the commentary side of things, because I think ultimately when I look at the plan for what I want this to be, it's always been, let's have progression here. I don't sit here and think like, oh yeah, I'm going to be doing YouTube 10 years from now. I'm going to be doing Twitch 10 years from now. It's always wanting to move, keep making that forward progress. So the esports commentary was the thing to go with. And about 2 years ago or so, I don't often like to phrase it this way because I do like what they're doing. It was just a bad experience for me. I have so many friends who work with them, for them, are in charge of it. But I had a bad experience with League Gaming, which is, arguably, at least on the North American side of things right now, the biggest community for competitive sixes. Yeah. So I knew I wanted to go elsewhere with that, and that's where I found NHL Gamer and having the opportunity to do the commentary over there. And it was the fortunate trip that I had getting to go out to the EA Studios in Burnaby, where I was a part of a group. Another member of that group is the guy behind NHL Gamer, Kenu, and fate have it, we were on the same floor, so it made it quite easy to just go over to his room, have those conversations as well with some other people who were there and involved still to this day with NHL Gamer over, hey, what's the plan with this? How do I get involved and where do we go from here? And, right now we're getting ready, coming up here very soon, actually, the 11th season of the ECL. And it's been very interesting to kind of get involved here in the past few seasons, primarily in the European competitive scene. We have done stuff in the North American side of things. Last year was our first real big season on the North American side of things, and I can't wait to see what we do there as well. But, you say everyone gets their start somewhere. Nothing like trying to learn Finnish names on the fly.
Trust me, it's not easy. You should see some of the names, because I mentioned in your chat one time, how he's not Finnish, but how do you say what you thought was Jacob Brahaney, but it's actually Jacob Brotney, and you thought it was the silliest thing you've ever heard. It's really fascinating how pronunciation works nowadays.
Yeah, no, it's a problem, and especially too, being doing what I do with the franchise mode stuff. Obviously everyone's fan of if you're a fan of a team, the prospects, exactly who they are. But in the early stages, and I always think back to this one, early on, it was Mikhail Sergachev, and then suddenly it became Mikhail Sergachev. And boy, did I get corrected for months old videos consistently. But yeah, no, I guess a great example, while you're not rocking a 63 right now, is for the Bruins, it's been Brad Marchand, then back to Marchand, then back to Marchand. It's a fun time. Keeps you on your toes.
Same thing with like Zdeno or Zdeno Chara, right? Like, people have been going back and forth with the pronunciation game, and it's a lot of fun, especially here in Sudbury, I gotta tell you. And I mean, that's a great story for how you started in esports with your commentary. It's definitely a very unique path to take, and I mean, people have told me that commentary is a very unique path to take, but why not take a chance and see what happens? And I mean, I've got to meet a lot of great people over the years, and definitely it wouldn't change anything. So I mean, Tougie, if you want to go after commentary, I got to tell you, you definitely have a knack for it. So it's a good way to start, I got to tell you. And I mean, would you consider your streaming kind of your practice point almost for this kind of stuff?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the way I viewed it is, being able to have that live interaction. And, for anybody who does watch my channel, they'll know with these franchise mode series and the playoffs, if we jump into overtime of a very important game, we'll watch the computers play and I'll get some more commentary reps in at that stage as well.
Which is a great idea. I love it.
Yeah. So I would say, when it comes to the YouTube side of things, the Twitch side of things, the esports commentary, it really is in a way trying, I guess, to build up the resume and seeing in what direction could this go, because ultimately you'll always hear people say this, as nice as it is and can give you a head start to go out, go to school, do things the way that are, the way things are supposed to be done. It doesn't always guarantee things.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember being a senior in high school, and we had an elective that was current events, essentially. What it was go home, watch the news every night. We'll talk about it the next day. And as a senior in high school, it really can mess with you to have the news every single night talk about, hey, here's this person with a master's degree working a cash register.
Yeah.
It can really scare you off of the idea of committing so much money towards the idea of going to college when you still might not be sure if that's what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So, hey, is this an unconventional method? Absolutely. Will it get me to where I'd potentially want to be? Who knows? But at the very least, I've gotten some great experiences out of this and certainly gotten the reps in. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, I mean, for me, when it came to applying for college, and I never told anyone this, I had two choices. One was accounting, or the other one was radio broadcasting. And I'm glad I took the latter, because now here I am, and I'm talking to probably the most famous guy that I know, at least on a YouTube and Twitch platform. So, I mean, it's come full circle.
That's one way to phrase it.
It's the best way to phrase it. Come on.
Never liked the idea of someone referring to me as being notable in any way.
Well, I mean, you got a lot of fans out there, Tougie. Like, I have to be honest, you are one of the most popular, YouTube and NHL streamers today. So, I mean, you're right up there with a lot of other notable names, because NHL doesn't get a lot of, a lot of notice on the streaming community. So you and other guys, like you said, obviously Deke Slayer, very good friend of yourself and mine, really making NHL known. But unfortunately, NHL is making themselves known for all their own reasons. We'll get into that in just a moment. Now, first, I wanted to get your take before we get into the streaming stuff. Of course, you, being from Maine, have always been a supporter of the Mariners and the Portland Pirates. And of course, you got your Maine Mariners team back just a few years back. But now going into this season, the East Coast Hockey League announced that the North Division is taking a voluntary suspension for the upcoming season. And of course, that includes your Maine Mariners. Now, I never got the chance to ask you this. I wanted to know how you felt about the news coming out, because you've been so supportive since the team left Portland to go to Springfield. By the way, screw Springfield. You've been super supportive of Maine and Portland. How devastating is this news for the state of Maine as well as yourself?
I mean, I think anytime you talk about a local sports team not being there, whether it be temporary or just outright leaving, it's always, a sucker punch to the gut, to say the least. Mm-hmm. It wasn't great. I mean, it did bring back some memories of, when the Portland Pirates, as mentioned, left the AHL, what was 4 years ago. I think now at this point, 4 or 5 years ago. I try to forget when that happened, because, being in Maine, growing up here, you have, the option of, you can go to Portland and catch an AHL, now an ECHL game, or you can go that little bit of an extra mile, go down to Boston for a lot more money, we'll say. And obviously, depending on who you are, I don't have any shame in saying, like, okay, coming from a lower middle class family at the time that had some financial issues due to my dad's health issues, which we won't have to get too much into here. I'm not against it, but point being, what was easier to do? Yeah. Go to Boston and sit in the 300s, the upper deck, for about $90 minimum a person, or you go to the alternative. We went to the alternative quite a bit, and I have so many fond memories, going to AHL hockey games, and over the past few seasons, going to the ECHL games now as well with the Mariners. I went to their first ever game. I own all 3 jerseys that they've put out. I wish I had one with me here right now. I
Gorgeous
don't,
jerseys, I
unfortunately.
have to say, by the way.
They are
I love them.
tremendous, and I will say their new alternate is better in person than some of the preview pictures
I
may
personally
have
like it.
looked.
I think it's great.
I will say it's not often a shoulder patch design. I think, look to the Vegas Golden Knights reverse retro.
Mm-hmm.
It's not often a shoulder patch design works as a main logo. I think with the Mariners jersey it did, not so much with Vegas, but that's an entirely different discussion. But yeah, no, it was rough. I had plans with friends to go to games this year, just like we always do. Same group of friends I've been going to games with since I was 10 years old. A big part of my life, going down to Portland, catching these games. And it is a shame, of course, that they're not going to be there. I think it's a bit more promising to have them say, okay, we're sitting out the season. Because when you talk about, especially minor, I guess, minor league sports, will say, there's been concerns all over the globe, really. I mean, I'm a big fan of football, soccer as well. And, there's so much fear for these lower level teams that they might not recover due to COVID. So, when you hear that, oh, your ECHL team, your local ECHL team is going to be sitting out a season, it's frustrating, but the news could be worse. And it could have been, oh, they're going under because of this. So I'll take what I can get. It's a shame that they have to set out a season. But on the flip side, it might be the safer thing to do for a lot of people.
It's understandable, the reasons why, because again, why take a risk with a global pandemic that we have never seen in our lifetime before happen right now, and your team have to go under because of the pandemic and you playing? Because again, the debate here in Ontario, especially for Northern Ontario teams, is is there going to be fans allowed in the building, which I don't think will happen because Southern Ontario is just in a total disarray. And I mean, again, in your division, you got the Newfoundland Growlers, who are still fairly new to the league. You have the Toronto Marlies, who, I mean, Toronto can afford to sit out a season. They can afford to sit out 3 seasons. For Maine, though, they're a fairly brand new team. They've only been in the league for a few years, and they have to sit out a season again. So, again, I understand for the right reasons, and I'm sure you do as well. But it never makes it easier because you don't get to see hockey, which sucks. But I mean, like you said, there are potentially other minor league teams you can go check out. If the Bruins do come back, of course, with the NHL, there's a chance there might be fans. So you might have to take the alternative. But again, I can understand why the North Division is bowing out. Because again, Atlanta and Norfolk earlier had announced they're not going to play this season. So they're down to 16 teams now, which is going to be a really condensed league. It's going to be weird. But I understand why. That's just my view on it.
No perfect answer, I'd say,
There really
with
isn't
anything going on. So
yeah, and it is tough, and hopefully we can see them back in the league. I'm sure we will, because fans have petitioned for Maine to come back for a long time, and now they're finally back, which of course is great news. Now, Tougie, let's move into the streaming and NHL portion of this interview. Now, of course, on Sunday you did something you have never done before. And that was, of course, your Hunt for Rumble charity stream. Now, originally, you set the goal for $500, and I think it's fair to say that was blown out of the water, nearly raising $6,000 for the Seattle Children's Hospital. So, first of all, congratulations on an amazing stream and raising all that money towards the Seattle Children's Hospital. Now, I have to ask, because a lot of people probably aren't familiar with the origin story of this series, but describe to people where the Hunt for Rumble series began and why you do it.
So it's funny because you mentioned Draft to Glory already. So it was NHL 17 looking for a way to try to differentiate, to try and differentiate my franchise mode series compared to everyone else's, which isn't exactly the easiest thing to do. If you base content off of a mode, whether it be franchise mode, ultimate team, be a pro, anything else really, like there are eventually going to be limitations. You have to try and get creative. Yeah. I won't claim to be the most creative. Again, mentioning being a fan of soccer, being a fan of FIFA and playing the FIFA series as well, and checking out some of the content creators on that side of things. I will always credit to them. There's a creator by the name of Cutsy, who has a series called Youth Squad Legends, which is a series that he bases or builds up a team only using essentially youth players and, essentially documenting their journey to see what happens.
Mhm.
So I took that same kind of concept with Draft to Glory, which was, okay, let's start off with the worst team we can possibly have, only get players through the draft and see where that takes us. And that first series in NHL 17, who knew, for a game that came out 4 years ago, that it would still be so impactful for me.
Yeah.
But it was that first series, the first player, first episode, first player to win an award was a guy by the name of Chris Rumble. Didn't even have a picture in the game. Just like, that's a hilarious name. He wins an award. It's a good time. And of course, we go through that series. It really was, I think, a turning point for my channel. And, I mentioned it on Sunday during that stream. I mentioned it every time I bring up that particular series. You look at one of the other content creators, one of the other big ones, I mentioned him already, but X-Tech happened to put a bit of a spotlight on that series for me on Twitter. And it certainly helped. There was a bit of a kickstart from there.
Yeah.
And it just kept going to the point where that series is now still obviously a staple of my channel right now. For NHL 21, it is the only series that I can currently do because of some of the game's issues, but we're making the best of it, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
But after that initial series ended, we were an ultimate team, and the idea came up from the chat to try to pack players that were notable from that series. And I think it was multiple months and about 3 million coins or so later, we finally packed Rumble. Now, a lot of people have asked me, like, oh, well, why'd you focus on packing him instead of just getting him off the market? And for me, number one, I didn't think it was going to take that long, but it was kind of replicating what we see more in FIFA, where it's a big deal, kind of a big deal, to have a card as the first owner, to pack that card, to say, no, I didn't buy this, I packed him. And obviously it's a bigger thing for some of the bigger cards in the game, the bigger, more notable names. So for me, it was just kind of more of a joke to run with, that, oh, we got to get him first owner, we got to pack him. Like I said, it took a very long time.
Yeah. And
since then, every year we've done that. And throughout the years, Chris himself became aware of this. I was informed that he had shown his teammates some of the reaction videos to us succeeding and packing him, which might be the most embarrassed I have ever felt in my life. Probably. It just kind of kept being a thing every year. It was just a sticking point. It was something for me to do, especially in Ultimate Team, as my interest in the actual gameplay of the ANHL series continued to kind of go downhill. That's, again, an entirely different discussion, but I've mentioned it. This last console generation that we're just getting out of now, the Xbox One and PS4 generation, I felt like at the start of that, you could have gone left, you could have gone right. EA went right, and I wish they had went left with a lot of decisions behind the gameplay. But, the Hunt for Rumble gave me the opportunity to still do something with an Ultimate Team, which was, a nice way to not just have to grind franchise consistently and burn out on the mode. So every year it was a thing. And this year, there was a moment where Chris actually ended up moving. He was playing in the German league and moved over to Norway. Yeah. And his new team, the Stavanger Oilers, posted a bit of a story about him and his history. And the big part of that being that he had stayed at the Seattle Children's Hospital after being diagnosed with cancer as a teen. So the second I saw that, I knew exactly what I wanted the Hunt for Rumble to be this year, and for that to be the first charity stream that I've done. I don't really know why I waited so long to do a charity stream. I think maybe a big part of it, and it kind of goes to show with what I set the goal for this stream, is I just didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't want to, I guess in a way, maybe embarrass myself by setting a goal and saying even 500 and only getting like 150 and just being like, well, that's kind of embarrassing because, even if it is someone like you who's like, hey, you're big in this community, I still in a way don't view it that way. So I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a fragile ego. I don't know. But I just wanted to make sure that if I did something like this, we raised a solid amount that I could feel like, okay, we did something here. This is a decent chunk of change that could really help. And ultimately, I think we hit that mark. As mentioned, $500 goal. We hit $500 in 15 minutes, and ultimately hit 5,602. I believe was the final count as of earlier this afternoon, and it's a feeling that hasn't necessarily set in yet. I mean, how can you? It's tough to, especially because it was it's tough to, I guess, for that to set in, because I set these plans forward on pretty short notice.
Yeah.
It really started to come together right around the end of last week. I think I announced the stream on the Friday, and then we did it on the Sunday. But I was able to work with a lot of really good people that helped me put this together. Chris himself being able to offer up some Stavanger Oilers merch throughout the stream. He eventually offered a stick as well, which he is going to be shipping from Norway to the United States. So pray for his wallet. Wow. Being able to work with, whether it be something as simple as, one of my main graphics guys, someone I know you're familiar with, but Timo from the Baker and Timo show, another excellent set of streamers. Whether or not it was just contacting him and being like, hey, I need a graphic for this. He's like, oh, yeah, I'll do it for free. Don't worry about this one. That was a gigantic help.
Yeah.
Whether it be, again, another streamer, Crash Andrews, saying, hey, you normally have a confetti cannon because it's the dumbest thing in the world. Let me sponsor that confetti cannon, put that money towards the stream. And yes, it's a nightmare to clean up, as I can attest to from earlier this afternoon.
Yeah.
The goalie guild as well, able to help, just on 2 days notice saying, here's $100, good luck with this. It was incredible as well. Having, viewers of the channel say, hey, here, use this. I'll take care of shipping and everything, but here, use this. Franchise hockey, willing to offer game codes. Now, I think 10 game codes it was for FHM 6. Again, on 2 days notice, all of this kind of came together.
Yeah.
It's just, it was, I think it was a long time coming. And I know Chris was ecstatic over how well this, panned out. I certainly am, to the point where it still doesn't really feel like it happened.
Yeah.
But, I think there's that part of me that wishes, like, okay, even more would be nice. And obviously, it's not that I'm not thankful and not happy for it, but I think just blown away by what it was and excited to see what it could potentially be with more than 2 days notice.
Yeah. And, you brought up the, trying to differentiate yourself by pulling a specific player in hut. And I mean, you think about a name that a lot of people do remember, but people haven't heard of in a while, is Bacon Country. Of course, he got his start with his Eagle trolling series, but what people don't credit him towards is his Polinovi series. And same can be said for tactics as, Hunt for McDavid back in like NHL 18 and 19 and what have you. And I mean, yours is definitely very unique, especially considering that the packs over the years have changed very much, and it's become a lot harder to pull said Chris Rumble. So it's definitely a very unique series, and I think that's what draws people in. And I mean, Tougie, you had well over 200 followers consistently, not on just Sunday night, but on Monday as well, because eventually you got him, which I fell asleep for 30 minutes before it happened, but it still happened, and just the amount of support I can imagine was very overwhelming, especially for the goal that you set at the time and on such short notice. And I mean, you have said on social media, how thankful and gratuitous you are, but do you have like any other words for like anybody that, has helped you over this crazy 72-hour span? Do you just have any words for anyone in regards to the charity stream?
Well, I do want to say this as well. I mean, you mentioned Bacon Country, and in terms of, taking those ideas, I think that's what we tend to do as a community here is like, okay, what's a popular thing to do? How can we kind of meme it a little bit?
Put a spin on it.
For lack of a better term. It's an interesting thing to be like, hey, let's pack a really good card that everybody wants, which we did actually pack in Alex Ovechkin. So credit to Bacon Country there, and people were mentioning that as we packed him. That was one of the highlights for me. But yeah, so why let everyone else try to pack the good stuff? We want this 71 overall silver card that for some reason is impossible to get. And it just works. But again, thinking back to the stream and whether or not it is the donations directly to the charity, which again, obviously, I am immensely thankful for. And like I said, I talked about it, wanting to make sure that when I did this charity stream, that there was a substantial amount raised to say, especially if it involved Chris, because I think that was my big issue is, hey, I want to do a charity stream, and you've been kind of a notable name for my community, and we raised $200. That has a lot less of an impact than, hey, we raised almost $6,000. So that was a big thing. And then obviously it was more than just the donations directly to the charity. There were a lot of people, especially on that second day. We spent about 14 and a half hours over the course of 2 days doing nothing but opening packs in Ultimate Team. It was as fun as it sounds. But, there were a lot of people, saying, hey, here's $20. Spend 10 first. If you get them, cool. And then the other 10 can go to charity.
Yeah.
Or, hey, just here's $20. Just open more packs. Keep going and see if you can get them. So there was so much to it in terms of, okay, here are the charitable donations, but then also here are the people saying, keep the stream going. And it was something that I was worried about at the start of the stream as well, because you need to make sure that you're conveying the message properly at the time. You don't want to have anybody be able to misconstrue what you're doing and think that you might be using money that was meant to go to charity on packs in a video game. That's a fine line where if somebody thinks that, that's the worst case scenario for me. So thankfully, most people knew what was going on here. I obviously made sure at every moment to be like, okay, here's the donation link. And then if we get into the situation where, well, damn, the near million coins in game that we built up, this massive stockpile just burns to rubble and it still doesn't work, then we might have to rely on this. And again, the viewers were there as well to help keep that going. And it just seemed to, throughout that stream, especially on day 2, consistently, the worst case scenario would keep happening to keep the stream going. We'd get down to the final 2 or 3 packs, and it would be, oh, here's an item that gets you $60K.
Yeah.
I think the highlight of the stream for me has to be about an hour or so before we packed Rumble, which again happened at about 2:20 in the morning, I think, which is also kind of embarrassing to say. But, it was getting down to it. I think we got 3 icon collectibles and 4 packs.
Wow.
Now, those icon, for the people who don't know, a collectible like that can be used to get, some of the best players in the game, some of the highest rated players, legends like Gretzky and Lemieux. And instead, I'm immediately selling those to continue trying to get a 71 overall player. It's just the absurdity is you have to explain what this is. Isn't lost on me, trust me. But yeah, I think just that moment really kind of sealed just how absurd it was, where it just felt like last night was the night to make it happen. A lot of people helped make that happen for sure. And, I think proud and happy, happy obviously, but proud of my community in a lot of ways to help make something like that happen. To say the least, very much appreciative for what I've somehow been able to build over the past 5 years and the people that are a part of that. It's something else.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the craziness of day 2. For me on day 1, because I remember, obviously Rumble was hard enough to pull, but you pulled about 5 or 6 Stavanger Oilers and 2 of their jerseys over the course of that time. And every time it just got funnier and funnier for a lot of people, and slowly started to settle in that Rumble may not make an appearance at some point. And then when you got an icon in Was it a base pack or was it the premium pack? Because I can't
It,
quite
it was
remember.
it was the base pack, the
Which is
5K pack.
crazy. And I mean,
It happened twice, by the way.
that happened twice. I seen the first one, but I didn't. Who was the second one?
So day one, which again was a 10.5 hour stream. Day one, we got the, I think, 85 Brad Park.
Debated.
Yes, which was horrifying. That
Yeah.
it's like, oh, here's this card. How crazy is this going to be? And then it's like, it's not that good. And then day two was the Sid Abel,
Wow.
which was also hilarious and incredibly sad. But you mentioned packing so many of the teammates. There are 24 cards on the Stavanger Oilers, and I'm pretty sure we packed 18 out of 24 before Rumble was the 19th. I think we went back and counted,
which is crazy,
at the end of last night's stream. So that level of bad luck is impeccable.
Yeah, it was a crazy event to say the least. I mean, there were a lot of amazing moments, but then obviously pulling the Rumble. I seen your highlight from Twitch earlier today, and you couldn't even pop the confetti cannon. You were just so out of it. That was probably one of the funniest moments for me. And I mean, again, just amazing work with the stream. Of course, I donated. A lot of people donated, especially that one guy that donated like over $750.
Yeah,
which is absurd.
G-Town G-Man with over $750, and I feel terrible because with the, with the incentives we had, the items that we were giving away, he didn't win a single one.
Wow,
and I feel terrible about that. But the selflessness that some people displayed is still just that's what's hard to wrap your head around.
Especially during a global pandemic when everyone is strict for money.
Now, that's the big issue that I had and why I was concerned with this and why I set the goal to 500. It's a pandemic.
Yeah.
I especially wanted to get the stream done. The reason why it was on 2 days' notice, I wanted to get this done before Black Friday.
Yeah.
That was my thought. Before Black Friday, before people are really starting to think about Christmas shopping, let's get this done. Let's see if we can at least get a decent amount. Hope for 500 minimum. If we get 1,000, that's awesome. And then again, it ends up being over 5,600, which still, again, just anytime I say that number, it doesn't seem real, but here we are.
And I mean, it's going towards an amazing cause. And as myself and a lot of people said in your stream, it's for the kids. And that's why you put yourself through that long 14-hour ordeal. It's for the kids.
You would think it would be fun. And I mentioned this on day 2 of the stream. Essentially having people give you money for the sake of opening hockey card packs. You would think, it's like, oh, we're living the dream here. This is great. But when you do it for 14 hours,
yeah,
it starts to lose a little bit of the fun involved with it. So
you were quiet for most of day one, which, I mean, it just brought, even more people in because we knew how ridiculous it's getting. But again, just congratulations on an amazing job well done. And I believe at the time your donation box is still open for the charity, I believe, which of course is through extralife.org, which of course Rooster Teeth has used Extra Life for their charity streams as well. People can still make a donation at the time of this recording, correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
Best place to find that link, I would say, is on my pinned tweet on Twitter, at Tougie24. Obviously, the link is a little bit complicated. I should probably shorten that up. But one of the things that's just, again, insane to me is, you talk about someone like Rooster Teeth, just gigantic company using this platform to help raise money. And obviously, we got nowhere close to them. But the overall rank for us on Extra Life is currently, at the time of recording here, I'm looking at it right now, 177th.
Wow.
Which, for a stream that was put together on 2 days' notice,
it's pretty crazy. That's very amazing.
That's something.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. And I doubt this will be the last time that something like this would happen. And I mean, again, just an amazing job well done on such short notice too. That's truly a great accomplishment too. So again, congratulations on that. Let's move into the reason why I wanted to bring you in here. NHL 21, of course, has been out for just over a month now. And obviously, there was big questions at the beginning if there would be a new NHL video game release, especially with the new gens coming along for the Xbox Series X and the PS5. Here we are, about a month or 2 months in, and let's just say it hasn't been an enjoyable time for the majority of the community, yourself included, because you're most notable on Twitch and YouTube for your roster editing and your franchise modes, and of course, at the very beginning, on day one, there were immediate problems with the game. Now, of course, you're an EA game changer, and you have been for, I think, a couple years now, maybe more.
3 years now, yeah.
You, of course, have to, listen to the people and send answers back to EA. And this year has probably been, especially during a global pandemic, let's keep that in mind, one of the most stressful games and just anger-inducing games that EA has put out. And again, they gave themselves an extra month. They decided to release it, I believe, it was either the second or third quarter in October instead of the usual September release. Right. So they had that extra time, but unfortunately the game, even after 2 major patches in less than a month, it's unfortunately still not working. Now, just answer these questions for a lot of people. I want to get your general opinion. Of course, the opinions have changed in a lot of people since day one, but there are still a lot of issues with this game. And I mean, you can go in depth about them, and your I don't know how to phrase this, but your discretions towards some of the parts of the game. I'll let you get into it, but just your overall experience with NHL 21 this year.
It hasn't been great, unfortunately. And, you talk about the extra month that they were given, and I think a lot of us were hoping that, not for anything overly drastic. I mean, there are people who, probably do have unrealistic expectations. It's tough when you hear, oh, here's a big company like EA, but also, don't expect them to have, so-and-so amount of resources. But I think for me, the biggest thing was like, okay, here's this extra month. That month should help make sure that at least nothing's broken or not working properly.
Yeah.
That didn't have an issue in the prior game. Mm-hmm. If some of the new stuff has an issue, okay, it's understandable. But just don't have anything that was already established all of a sudden have problems. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that has been the case. And it's tough because, getting to be a game changer, getting to see, the game before, the general public gets to, I was able to talk with other people, within the program, and none of us saw a lot of these issues that we're seeing, not just within franchise mode, but in general. A lot of us didn't see these issues being a thing. So it was as big of a surprise to us. And I know that probably sounds like, don't blame us. Blame EA. They're the big bad in this. But genuinely, there was a slight concern when it comes to franchise mode over trade values, but nothing that was overly concerning that would make you think this is going to be a game-breaking issue. And then the game comes out, and unfortunately, it wasn't in great shape. And pretty much, I think with every mode, you could find the general complaints over, hey, this isn't working. How isn't this working properly? And it's a shame because I do stand by it that, you look at NHL as a whole, and it's a shame I don't like the gameplay as much because I feel like the rest of the game is pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially when comparing to other games. Now, I tend to compare with the franchise modes in particular. But if you look at NHL franchise mode and compare it to Madden, NHL wins that.
Yeah.
Despite having a significantly lower budget, NHL wins that. There are some things, of course, I think that the Madden series does quite well. But there are plenty of people. I think probably the best example is someone like Soft Drink TV on YouTube, who was the one, I think, that got the hashtag Fix Madden franchise trend going. That trended worldwide in the top 10. There are a lot of people who understand that, you look at this console generation, what has Madden done with their franchise? And the answer is not a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah.
To the point where within the last month, they patched, actually within the last couple of weeks, they just patched in the ability to see a playoff tree. You didn't have the ability to see the playoff bracket in the game until the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
So that kind of shows you, like, okay, NHL's better than that. Is it because the bar is incredibly low for Madden, or because it's actually good? I argued that NHL was actually good and trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
You compare it to something that is critically acclaimed every year, like MLB The Show.
Mm-hmm.
MLB The Show has a good franchise mode, but they haven't done anything with it for 5 years. So I see the ambition that NHL has and the changes that they're making, and I'm like, we have, at least on console, because I do think an example of out of the park baseball, especially Football Manager, the type of games, the serious simulation games that you see on PC, they're an entirely different animal.
Yeah.
But I think looking at the console's exclusive series, you have the NBA 2K series, which is head and shoulders above everybody else and what they offer for that particular mode. And then out of nowhere, FIFA, coincidentally made in the same building as the NHL series, really started to get it together this year as well. So I thought, NHL guaranteed 2 or 3 behind NBA, like they're right there, and just lost their footing out of the gates. And I still think if they were to fix the mode and get it to where it should be, it is still a top 2 to 3 franchise mode series. Speaking to that specifically, it's still top 2 or 3 on the market in terms of console-based sports games, but it's still not there. There are still issues with that mode in particular. And speaking to the rest of the game, like I said, I'm not a fan of the gameplay. The biggest thing for me, I just think they've taken some missteps in terms of trying to accomplish something where I just don't know if it's able to properly accomplish it, and mainly in terms of coincidental contact or incidental contact, where it's just too much. Hockey's a game of randomness for sure.
Yeah.
Random bounces absolutely dictate the way it plays out. But you look at other sports games, or just other games in general on the market, and you want to replicate the sports side of it, but you also want it to have it be a video game where time invested in skill is what ultimately pays off at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I don't think that's where it necessarily is. And then you have something like Be a Pro as well, which got a massive overhaul this year, but there were some polish issues with that needed to be addressed that weren't. So to answer your question, overall, it's been disappointing. It has. And for me, I don't think I uploaded anything, NHL 21 related really for the first 3 weeks or so after launch, which is honestly kind of devastating because, if you base yourself on a video game, especially a yearly release video game, the launch month is the big time of year for you to grab attention, to get new subscribers, to set your channel on an upward trajectory for that year. And I didn't feel like I could properly do that. So it was a very disappointing launch to this game for me for a couple of different reasons.
Yeah, and, as someone that's supported the EA NHL franchise for a long time, I gotta say, I'm disappointed with it too, especially someone that gets very invested in HUT. Not so much to an extreme point as some like major streamers and what have you, but for me, I was never really that big of a Be a Pro guy. I was before I really got into HUT and Eashel. To see Be a Pro get a huge revamp, which is basically Live the Life version 2, is great to see. For me, I feel like they probably should have waited for when they made their first actual game for New Gen. And a lot of people don't understand, Tougie, and I don't know if you can side with me or not. I don't think anybody should have really expected major changes from EA, considering this is the last game on what is now the last gen, which of course is the Xbox One and PS4. I didn't expect major changes, really. And the really only major shakeup was Be a Pro. And really, I think for NHL 22, when and if that happens, people will expect it to be one of the best NHL video games ever made. And there's obviously a lot of high expectations on EA's plate, and I can understand, there's a global pandemic going on, and they gave themselves the extra month. It's still not a perfect game, and there's been a lot of comparisons that this game might be up there with NHL 15 as the worst, which is a really high plateau to put itself on for bad games, because 15 was a disaster right out the gate. But for me, nothing compares to what NHL 21 has done for just how bare bones and broken the game really felt from day one. And I, have talked to you really only about my discretion for the game because you're the one that is able to talk to the EA representatives. It hasn't been perfect. I can understand with the pandemic and everything, but people are very frustrated, and people seem like EA isn't making any steps to change things. But again, they need to understand there's a global pandemic going on, especially in BC. It's really hard to get out of your house. And I think you could side with me on that. People need to be a little bit more patient. I was very upset the other night with how the game felt for me, but I can understand that they can't fix it right away. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the constant back and forth, right? It's just the effects that COVID has had on the development cycle throughout the summer when, they are putting in the work on the game and heading into, the home stretch and then into launch as well. It's just how much of an effect has it had, and it probably can't be understated. I was the same way. I wasn't, before I even got the heads up on, hey, here's what we're doing with the game, I had my expectations very low.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, it's the final game of a console generation. You probably want your expectations to be low because, you are going to be looking ahead as a developer to next gen. The problem, though, as you mentioned, and we look back to NHL 14 on the 360 and the PS3 at the time. Mm-hmm. What was the big selling point for NHL 14? And you mentioned it already. It was Live the Life, a big Be a Pro overhaul. And then we get to NHL 15, which was an unmitigated disaster. Yeah. The gameplay was okay, but the modes were bare bones, stripped down. You could tell that they weren't given enough time to properly prepare for the task that they had ahead of them. And it took a huge, it really took a lot of the steam that the series may have had completely away. Yeah. It was a huge knock to the franchise's reputation that they still perhaps haven't completely recovered from. No. That might be a fair assessment.
It's very fair.
So I do agree that, for NHL 21, I was happy with the changes that they were making. I thought as long as they were well implemented, that we would be good to go, which, well, we know how that's gone, unfortunately. I do think the key, though, here is that they took that extra year. Yeah. Rather than programming a hockey game for the previous gen and now the brand new gen, it was, okay, let's take that extra year to make sure we get this right. And I can speak to this. They know the damage that their reputation took from NHL 15. And they know it can't happen again.
No.
So are expectations high for what will be NHL 22 on next gen? Yeah. And I'm not sure just how exactly they're going to pull it off. Mm-hmm. Obviously, being a game changer under NDA, I couldn't mention anything even if I know it, but nothing has been mentioned to me yet about what they're planning. The problem the issue that I have is honestly out of concern for them, because you take that year off to focus on next gen, but COVID happens.
Yeah.
So expectations are at an all-time high. People are thinking of the disaster from the beginning of this generation that just ended, but then you also had that extra hurdle of COVID added in. I don't think we'll see a repeat of what NHL 15 was, but at the end of the day, too, it's just I don't know just what exactly the expectation should be. I do think in a way it was nice to kind of get the Be a Pro overhaul out of the way. Sure, what more could they have done if they waited for the next gen? Who's to say? But, the question now is, what are the big selling points going to be for 22?
Yeah.
Because franchise mode sees these increases every single year. Be a Pro just got their big upgrade for the first time in like 6 years. What's it going to be? Yeah. Is it going to be general improvements across the board? Is it going to be gameplay? I mean, we know how these big publishing companies work with EA. It's despite the fact that we don't see that many physical copies sold anymore. What's the big feature listed on the back of the box? Yeah. And for NHL 22, I have no idea what that's going to be. Mm-hmm. I can have, tempered expectations because of COVID, but as we kind of know, but just how the internet works, overreactionary. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, I'm sure they'll hold off announcing the next NHL until the summer, as they normally do. But as much as people mention, and obviously people have claimed this for years, that I should work for EA in some capacity, whether it be with the roster help or whatnot, I don't know if I'd necessarily want to for this next calendar year, because I do not envy the stress that dev team is going to go under.
Yeah.
And, call me an apologist for them and whatever the next game might be, the debut on next gen. But you just take, you take yourself out of the situation of being in this community and just look at what they're probably having to face right now. Yeah, no, I personally wouldn't want a part of that.
I wouldn't be able to handle that stress either. I mean, this is a really stressful time period, especially with the pandemic going on. And, I was kind of angry with people that defended this game. But, no video game is perfect. Like, you look back to, NHL 2K10, yeah, it was a great game, but it wasn't perfect. And, I mean,
True.
You've used your hindsight series in the past to compare... especially during your Cold War series, comparing the 2K to the EA series and, how each series did and which series did it better. And you think of just, I feel like for me, EA is a few steps behind the game right now. And of course, 2K hasn't had an NHL installment since 2011 to 2012, which has been a long time now. So, and people keep thinking they're going to come back. I don't know if that's true, because the NBA series for them sells millions of copies worldwide. I mean, that is what really kept 2K in the business, because they lost their MLB, they lost the NHL license as well. So really the only thing they have left is NBA, and of course their other 2K game series. So for EA, obviously during a new generation console being out, the pressure's really on to make sure that this game is going to be one of the best that we've seen, because a lot of people say that NHL 14 was really the last great game we had, because it was really well-rounded, especially with Live the Life. And then, like you said, NHL 15 comes around, and they just chuck it out the window, and it just didn't stick around, which is a shame, because Live the Life was fantastic, and now we kind of get it back in the form of the new Via Pro. So who knows what the direction going forward is for EA? And again, we can't predict the future. we're not psychics. We can't.
I mean, take it from me, someone who's fortunate enough to be in a situation where I'm a little bit more in the know than the average player. But yeah, I don't know. That's the problem. It's a very interesting time, I think, to be a fan of this series, for better or worse.
Very much. Last NHL topic I'll relate to, because I know, you being the roster editing guru that you are, you have had a lot of roster editing, not just on your streams, but of course on your YouTube as well. You love to do roster edits because, I mean, this year, I gotta tell you, the overalls for a lot of these players was a bit egregious. I don't know if that's the correct word to use, but I have watched your roster rundown for NHL 21 probably 5 times, because I still can't get over how bad some of these overalls are. There seems to be no consistency, and they don't even seem to use their own grading system that they developed, in 19 or 18? I can't remember which one it was, but
it was NHL 17.
Right.
The foundation for it.
Right. So you have voiced how much you want roster editing in the EA series, which of course a lot of people would see. And then of course earlier today I saw your tweet, you retweet Snipe and Score, who put together his own custom roster and custom jerseys and putting in alumni players as well. Do you think EA at some point, maybe for the new gen, might go forward with this, or do you think they're going to stay behind? Because the last time we seen roster editing was in NHL 2K10, and that was a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of roster sharing, for a lot of people, if you... NHL is interesting at this point, because it's almost like a live service game at this point.
Yeah.
You can, as a hockey fan, if you play EA NHL, there's so many different things you can do. If you want to have that online competitiveness, that is there for you in EA SHL or HUT. If you want to be a little bit more casual about that competitiveness online, there are ways to go about that, like Threes Arcade and stuff like that. If you care about, the idea of having your own player and, be a pro is there for you. And then when it comes to franchise mode, a lot of people can just play it casually, and that's fine. We'll use what EA provides with their roster updates, and it's cool. There might be stuff I disagree with, but it doesn't bother me. Mm-hmm. But of course, with every game, you're going to have that hardcore subsection that really does care. And like I said, for me, for some reason, it's been an obsession. Like, I can remember in NHL 08, I'd get home from school on trade deadline day. I didn't have a computer in my room. Actually, I would have had a school laptop at that point, actually. So I remember doing this before I even had a school laptop, to be honest. But I can remember immediately going on that school laptop, going to NHL.com and being like, oh, this dude moved to this team. Let me go on to NHL and put that guy in the right spot now. There's just something about it where having it be like I said, as close to authentic as possible is the way to go. And when it comes to the idea of roster sharing, I mean, again, now for the past few years, I've documented every single change that I make to my rosters on documents, videos, whatever, so that people can directly copy it, which is archaic at this point. Because like I mentioned earlier, in the 360 days, you used to at least have the ability to download a file onto a thumb drive and then get somebody else's work. I don't believe that's possible on the Xbox. I think some people were saying it is possible on PlayStation, but fortunately, there's no cross-play or cross-file sharing or anything like that. So there's really nothing that can be done for people to want to essentially copy what I do, other than directly doing it, doing all the work that I'm doing essentially without the research, but just copying, pasting. And that's absolutely crazy. And I mean, it really does seem like, because unfortunately, for whatever reason, EA Burnaby, which again is where the NHL series is made and where the FIFA series is made, are the only games right now that don't have a lot of the file sharing capabilities that we see in other games, even other EA titles. The Madden series has the ability, if somebody goes on Madden and they create, here's the 1998 NFL season, and you have the ability to download that, and then, hey, all of a sudden, John Elway's on the Broncos again. And that is an entirely different experience, because obviously, who wants to go back and play NFL Quarterback Club 98? No offense to that game, but, there's a difference between, say what you want about the gameplay, but, the ability to have rosters from the past with the new modern graphics, there is something really incredible about that. Yeah. So then you look at not having the ability to do that on NHL, but you can do it on Madden, you can do it on FIFA, or on MLB, you can do it on NBA with 2K, but you can't do it here, despite it being a consistent request. I mean, if you look at the EA NHL Twitter account, the primary responses are going to be, aside from fix the game, you're of course going to have people mentioning GM Connected, which again is another an online franchise. And again, we see online franchises in Madden. We see it in MLB. We see it in MLB. We see it in the NBA series as well. It's just, unfortunately, the NHL series is lacking behind on some of these tools that really allow a community to, express their creativity. Yeah. So whether or not it's, and really that hurts the casual player, that hurts a content creator like myself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big part of the reason as to why I still do the custom edits. Not just trying to get players more in line with what their overall and potential subjectively should be, but adding in players that EA can't add. It helps make my content a little bit more unique compared to somebody else's. Because if another content creator wants to do that, they also have to put in the work. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Snipe and Score, and he's somebody that over the past couple of years, he'll go back and, much like I said, with like, oh, here's John Elway on the 98 Broncos, for NHL, he'll do, hey, here's the 2003, 2004 NHL season, accurate teams, accurate players, and that's something that I want to play. Yeah. But obviously, doing everything that I do already and trying to balance the personal life, there's just not the time. No. So it is incredibly frustrating, I would say, to still have that not be a feature that we have. There's just such a positive to it. And yeah, I mentioned ratings and everything being subjective, but I think, overall, like I said, if you look at the feedback, it's like, oh, hey, fix the game, GM connected, where's roster sharing? It's a feature that is desperately wanted. I would like to think it's a feature that we're going to get sooner rather than later because honestly, it just seems like something that it just seems so obvious.
Yeah.
Give the community a tool to be as creative as they possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
And to see it in other games and to still not have it here is still pretty disheartening.
It definitely is, because I have used, the sharing tool with NBA 2K, which I've recently been getting into, which is amazing. And, you can upload custom logos, custom jerseys. You can do that in MLB as well. It just feels like NHL is just like 3 steps behind everyone else. And it really is disheartening because the NHL community is very, very large, as much as people don't tend to agree. It's one of the biggest communities in sports by far, at least in my opinion. It is kind of disheartening to see
at
that
the very least, not to interrupt, but at the very least, it's one of the most passionate and one of the most hardcore.
That's exactly what I was going for.
What this community might lack in numbers, the passion is comparable to almost any other, especially within the sports gaming community.
Yeah, it trumps every other sport, really, and people can, dunk on us all they want, but like hockey fans really cared, myself included. I was a hockey fan at one point. Now and now my job revolves around hockey. So, I'm very passionate about the EA series. Do I want them to go under? Obviously not, because then we don't really have someone that can be able to produce these games. I want EA to improve, and I feel like with New Gen, they have so much room for improvement, and I hope they take those steps to make the improvement, and they actually do listen to the fans and, give people what they really want. Roster editing, roster sharing, and, custom stuff, not just in eShow, but and just having that flexibility and customization to really make your game unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I feel like New Gen's going to be able to complete that. So I completely agree with your points too. I feel like NHL can really make the step forward. But again, during a pandemic, it's hard to do that because money's going to be tight for a lot of people. I'm sure EA can be able to get around it, but crazier things have happened. Now, leaving the NHL aspect, because I think we've covered the bases. Of course, you and I are very avid jersey collectors. You and the hockey guy are the reasons that I got into jersey collecting. And of course, I've showed you my collection a multitude of times. I follow you on Instagram because you post pretty much every jersey that you have gotten so far.
I'm very far behind as of late, but
but of course you showcase your jersey collection, especially on Twitch, because you wear a different jersey almost every night. And so, roughly, how many jerseys would you say you have in your collection?
It's tough at this point. I did mention to you, before the stream that I've been splitting a lot of time between, my place and my girlfriend's place as of late. Enough, not crazy distance, but enough distance where it's like, yeah, I'm not driving back home and then coming back tomorrow type of thing. It's like, hey, so let me take my entire setup. I'll come stay for 3 to 4 weeks. Why not? Until we just make this official and one of us moves in. Yeah. But at this stage, I mean, the most I've had at one time, I think, was 90.
Wow.
Closing in on the 100 mark. At this point, though, I have been trying to downsize. I'll say that. Mainly because it's like, okay, it's tough to make the argument for, hey, I have 100 hockey jerseys that we need to find space for. Yeah, I have been trying to downsize in a way. Obviously, with some teams, there are jerseys that you want to own for multiple jerseys from the same team that you'd like to own, because for a lot of teams, it's not just, oh, hey, they've only had one good jersey, unless you're the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's right. I said it.
Get salty.
It's their current blue alternate, by the way, that they've had for quite a few years now. It's fantastic.
So good. It's so good.
But yeah, at this point, it's probably around the 60 to 70 mark.
That's about where mine is too, yeah.
I made the decision towards the end of the summer to sell some of the other ones to fund the money to get my grail for each team. Some teams I'm still going to have more than one. I think I have 7 Bruins jerseys right now. It's probably going to go up. Yeah, for the most part, it was okay. Let's try to prioritize here. Let's try to make sure that we have the best ones, my favorite ones at least, and then cut down on the number in general. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I got to be honest though, this is a hobby for the most part that just started up
Mhm.
this year. Just it was something that I decided, like, you know what, screw it, I want some of the stuff.
No, me too.
Yeah. So
Because
it
the
was it
pandemic
was a
rolled
bit fun.
around, and I set myself up with a goal to have at least one jersey from all 31 NHL teams, and I completed that a couple months ago. And I mean, my mom wasn't happy with me bringing a Bruins or Canadiens jersey in the house, but I'm like, Mom, that's part of the goal. So, it's not like you're going to see it. But I mean, my number's right about there with yours. I don't know if you have the one from every 31 yet, do you?
I am missing the Ottawa Senators. That was
Oh
the
my,
only
you
team
are
that I'm
so
short
close.
on. However, I mean, I could have had a Sens jersey at this point,
Yeah.
but like I talked about in terms of optimizing, the Sens Grail is either the Heritage jersey that they had, that they also turned into an alternate. It's either the creamed colors with the horizontal stripes going all the way down, or the black version of that. Either one. Unfortunately, if you want to get a legit one, it's going to run you about $225 minimum. So we've been playing the waiting game, trying to be patient and scout that one out. But yeah, for the most part, we're on track to hit 31 out of 31,
There,
thankfully.
there you go. And for me, my Senators jersey is like the old Alfredson era, the white version, which they brought back the logo and that look, and a lot of people liked it, obviously. Now, would you say you have a favorite jersey that's part of your collection? Like, what is your ultimate holy grail? Like, what would you consider the goat of your collection?
Oh boy, so it's there has been a lot of kindness shown my way over the past 5 years, which for me still doesn't seem kind of real. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just where someone could be like, hey, thank you for the entertainment. Here's something nice. Over the summer, I had my eyes on a jersey that was brought to my attention while I was on stream, and I'm like, yeah, I probably can't afford that. And the next day, I had someone message me saying, hey, I bought that. Do you want it? In exchange for playing a certain game on stream. And that was it.
Wow.
It is a 2001 Colorado Avalanche Ray Bork jersey with the 01 Cup patch, autographed.
Wow. I've
And
seen that one. It is something to behold.
yeah, so I have recently picked up a Nathan McKinnon jersey so that I actually have an Avs jersey to wear.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, being a Bruins fan, I mean, I didn't just decide that I like the Bruins. Both of my parents are hockey fans, have been and will be. And, my dad's favorite player was Ray Bork. So growing up, my first favorite player was Ray Bork. And I cannot tell you how many times I have watched the Game 7 from '01, Colorado and New Jersey.
It's too good. Too good.
And it probably, as indirectly led to the interesting commentary as well, because it was the ABC version of that, which means Gary Thorne was on commentary.
One of the best of all time.
Exactly, and it's a shame that he also has a passion for baseball and has been calling Baltimore Oriole games, which
I feel like his talent's being wasted in Baltimore.
you know.
I mean, it's still great stuff, but it's not the same as broadcasting NHL. It's not the same.
Right. I mean, you talk about influences, and Gary Thorne is definitely one of mine, and might be number one all time on my favorite list of commentators. And yeah. So just everything about having that jersey. Still, it doesn't seem. That's one of those things. Just I guess in life for me, like so much over the past 5 years, for me seems a little bit surreal. With what some of the stuff in my personal life, but a lot of stuff having to do with this, because 5 years ago, there's no way I'm still going to be doing YouTube, and there's certainly no way I'm going to be making money from it. There's no way I'm going to be, streaming every night and making money from it. There's no way I'm going to be commentating esports games. There's no way I would have been flown out to Vancouver on EA's dime.
Yeah.
There's just been so many crazy things, and I certainly rank like someone's gonna gift you this jersey that means a lot. It's like I see that jersey and I think of that moment, Ray Bork raising the cup, and I just remember like watching that VHS with my dad on occasions, through the following years, and so much of it just seems surreal. But
Yeah.
the long answer, of course, which I'm only capable of giving long answers to that question, would be that jersey. But I do have, like I said, I'm getting that collection down to, okay, here are my favorite jerseys, from every team. So I'm very happy with it, is what I'll say.
I mean, I don't even know if I can narrow down to a Hockey Gorilla jersey for me, because I mean, I do have a lot of jerseys, but just I feel like you and I have had a lot of luck when it comes to sniping jerseys, whether it be like locally or like from eBay or what have you. I remember, and you can kind of see it in the background, is I found 2 of the Washington Capitals Screaming Eagles jerseys on Facebook selling for $60 a piece. And there were 2 of them, which were Bondra and Yager. For me, I feel like that is one of my favorites, probably the favorite jersey I have ever seen in my life. And to own one of those is not only extremely rare, it's extremely fun to have. And to be able to have it in such perfect condition with the original tags and everything. And even like autographed jerseys, for your story, to get a Raymond Bourque with the Stanley Cup patch on a Colorado jersey in his final season. And you mentioned the Gary Thorne. I'm starting to get goosebumps thinking about it because it's just such a great moment. It's those kind of finds and that kind of generosity especially that really shows you, again, how passionate hockey fans are, and how, it really proves that, just the generosity and the way that hockey fans work is truly far more superior than most other sports. And I mean, again, I've got a lot of jerseys. I can really never narrow down to a favorite. And there's just so many. The Miroslav Satan, I showed you that one. I mean, that's right up there for me. Because, like, not only to have the goat head jersey, it's also autographed by one of the most underrated players, at least I think, from my generation of watching hockey. Because, I mean, just having such a vast jersey collection, especially one like yours, it's like you said, it's a hobby. It's a lifestyle that we like to take over, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's just a waste of money. It's like, no, because each jersey tells a story, and I mean, your story is very, very unique, and I gotta say, I never really understand the full story because I seen your Instagram, but I never got the full gist of the story. So thanks for sharing that story. Like that's honestly really incredible to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this was a very kind of out of nowhere decision, and it just kind of something I fell into at the start of the year. Seeing a lot of friends picking up jerseys, and like you said, it's not all that difficult in a way if you know where to look, and if you're patient and smart about things. To end up with some of these jerseys, and there's just something about it. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say in terms of a hobby. There's just something about either owning one, being able to frame it, or just being able to wear it, where it's like, yeah, no, it's just a great feeling. It's interesting, but I'm very happy with it. And I will say, the one Habs jersey that I own correlates to 2001, and it is a Patrick Roy, although the first time I wore it to my parents' house, I did have a paper bag over my head.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
I'm pretty sure that picture's on Instagram.
Yeah, it is. I remember checking the Instagram before we started. Tougie, this has just been an absolute pleasure. And again, when I first started watching, some of your videos, I never really got to tell you, I've gone through a lot of hardships, and I'm sure, a lot of people can relate to that. Just watching your videos and you putting your comedic spin on some stuff too, whether it's intentional or not, just really, really, I think, not just for me, but for a lot of people, really help people get through a lot of times, especially during a pandemic like this. So I just wanted to thank you again, just for doing such amazing hard work and just dedicating yourself to the NHL community and to YouTube and Twitch. And again, I'm sure we're going to be seeing plenty more work from you, whether the game is broken or not. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great videos coming along. So again, just thank you so much for doing this, and just thank you so much for all your amazing work.
I mean, I appreciate you having me on here. Again, we had this planned out a couple of times, and it's nice that it finally came together. But
Yeah.
the one thing that stood out here, I mean, aside from the fact that we do have
There it is.
the proof of that, I will say one of the other things, and you jogged my memory with this one. When it comes to the idea of why did I decide to do this, is I talked about some of the other YouTubers within the community that are still here that kind of influenced me to start up on NHL. But in a general sense, it wasn't probably a little bit over a year before I started doing this. It was a bit of a rough patch, and I've been pretty open and honest, I would say, in talking about a lot of my experiences in terms of someone who outright actively has battled depression and anxiety since I was 5 years old. It's a constant. I mean, hell, I'll be completely honest. Still to this day, on a daily basis, there are some days where it's like, oh, I can be sitting on the couch with my girlfriend watching TV, and in the way it's like your brain almost turns on you, and it's like, huh, you're happy. How can I ruin your day to day? That's still a daily thing for me. So it was around that time where I found a lot of YouTubers that I still watch to this day that I looked for to, like, okay, let me make it through this 10 to 15-minute video without any negativity. Okay, now let me watch another one and try to string it together. Like, there were, a lot of those channels that definitely helped me get through some rough patches. And I had that thought of, if me yelling about virtual hockey can somehow kind of, have that same effect for somebody, then that's a win for me. And the fact that I've had people, including yourself, tell me that, where it's like, hey, hearing you complain about how Carey Price is overrated in NHL has brought me great joy. As much as, like I said, it's cool to have been like, oh, hey, I got to have, this experience of going to Vancouver, which was the experience of a lifetime. As much as, it's been great to have people be like, hey, here's money, open virtual packs. As good as it's been to have like free games thrown at my face. It is stuff like the charity stream, and it is stuff like, having people tell me, hey, I was going through a rough patch. Watching you on stream helps a lot. It's those things that I call it cliched if you want, but above all else, that makes this worth doing. Because again, I remember sitting there and having those people, and it's like the fact that I know that again, I've been told that I'm one of those people for someone else. So it makes it worth it. And to be able to come on, here and talk to you, and again, I have no issue ever doing stuff like this. So I'd be more than happy to come back at any time.
Absolutely.
But, to just, to be able to be still doing this and to have those kind of moments, it definitely makes it all worth it.
No, and I am beyond appreciative of you coming on, and it's definitely been worth the wait. So, again, Tougie, just thank you so much for coming on. And again, for those that don't follow you, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, what have you, where can people find you just so they can watch you yell at a virtual hockey game?
If you want to hear me complain about Drew Doughty being overrated in NHL 21, all you have to do is search Tougie24. That's Tougie 24 on virtually everything. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram. There's a Discord. If you go on the YouTube side of things, the description has links to everything so that you can find this face. God knows why you'd want to. So that you can find this face pretty much everywhere you can. The OnlyFans might be coming soon. It's hard times out there, but hey, we'll see what happens.
And you're also on Patreon still, too, as well, right? Where can people find you on Patreon?
Again, patreon.com/Tougie24. If you care to chip in a little bit more, we always have some exclusive content going on there. I try to get the patrons involved on that side to try and help me make decisions on like what type of videos they'd want to see. Try to have some exclusive series going on there as well at all times. So, we have, surprisingly, I think, people were just happy to see the content back. I think we have higher numbers now on Patreon, or the highest numbers since the beginning of it when I started it back in January. And it was kind of the interesting thing right about this year. And we talked about the ebbs and flows. The start of this year, personal wise, was a bit down. So I'm like, let me really commit myself to NHL this year. And You look at something like Patreon happening, and then out of nowhere, hey, here's a pandemic and how that affects a lot of things. It's been an interesting year.
Yeah, no kidding. That is an understatement. And again, Tougie, just thank you so much for doing this. I would love to have you on again, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. So thanks for joining me here, and hopefully we can do this again sometime down the road.
Absolutely. Sounds good.